In the desert, she discovered an injured native warrior. His subsequent actions transformed two civilizations. The footprints in the sand revealed a tale of urgent flight. Clara crouched down next to them, her fingertips following the irregular marks where someone had obviously fallen from the stone precipice overhead, creating a path of disrupted soil and loose rocks. There were no hoof marks or boot impressions, only bare feet that had tumbled and slipped down the harsh slope, as though someone had been escaping through the darkness and lost their balance. However, what accelerated her pulse wasn't this discovery. The blood droplets formed a consistent and deliberate trail, pointing straight toward her concealed dwelling. These weren't the random spatters of a wandering, wounded person, but the focused route of someone who understood precisely their destination, someone who had been informed of her location. For 3 years, Clara had resided in this remote section of the territory, ever since her family vanished during what all believed to be a native attack. She had selected this isolated spot deliberately because nobody would seek her here. Travelers never passed by. No charts indicated her small stone refuge. Yet somehow, someone had known her exact whereabouts. The native warrior rested unconscious beside the crimson rocks, his breathing labored and uneven. 3 arrow injuries continued bleeding slowly. A severe wound across his torso had saturated his leather garments, and fresh rope marks on his wrists were unmistakably recent. He had been restrained not long ago, then managed to break free. Despite everything, he lived. Against impossible odds, he had endured wounds that should have been fatal, made a perilous climb down in darkness, and crossed miles of dangerous desert to arrive at her threshold. When she drew near, his eyes fluttered open, dark, perceptive, and containing an urgency that pierced through his evident suffering. "Clara Bell," he murmured, and she became motionless. He recognized her identity. "I was informed you resided here," he continued. "Told you might be the sole person capable of providing assistance." Her blood chilled. Nobody was aware she still lived. She had ensured this after the assault on her family, selecting solitude over the danger of her family's killers returning to complete their work. The warrior attempted to reach a leather bag at his side, his actions careful and purposeful despite his injuries. "A war is approaching," he gasped. "Between your community and mine within 3 days, and these papers," he clutched the bag protectively to his chest, "represent the only evidence that everything has been manipulated by another party." Clara gazed at him, her thoughts spinning. War? Which war? She had been isolated from all information for years, surviving alone in the wilderness. Yet as the warrior's desperate gaze met hers, she experienced something she hadn't felt since her family's murder. The feeling that her carefully concealed existence was about to shatter once more. Then he spoke words that made everything else disappear. "Your father lives. He has been collecting proof about what truly occurred to your family, and he directed me to your location." The statement struck Clara like a physical impact. Her father alive after 3 years of believing him dead, killed alongside her mother and younger sibling when they failed to return from their supply purchasing journey. "That's impossible," she whispered, though even as she spoke, her hands shook. "I searched for weeks. I discovered their wagon destroyed, their remains." "You found what someone intended you to discover." Chaitton's voice weakened, but his eyes remained fixed on her face. "Your father escaped, injured but alive. He's been hiding, gathering proof about what really happened that day." Clara's mind reeled. The wagon had been demolished, reduced to charred timber and scattered possessions. The bodies inside had been burned beyond identification, but she had found her mother's ring and her brother's leather boots. She had buried what remained and grieved for 3 years. "Evidence of what?" she demanded, kneeling closer despite every instinct urging her to flee. Chaitton struggled to sit upright, wincing as the movement reopened his wounds. "Someone has been orchestrating attacks, making it appear as though my people are responsible for raids on settler families, making it seem like your people are encroaching on sacred territory without permission." He coughed again, this time producing more blood. "But it's neither. It's a third faction, someone who desires both sides to wage war." Clara's throat constricted. Why would anyone want that? Because when we destroy each other, they can seize all the territory. The land between our people sits above something valuable, something worth killing for. His hand pressed against the leather pouch. These documents prove it. Names, dates, payments made to false witnesses. Your father risked everything to deliver them to me. The desert wind intensified around them, carrying the scent of approaching rain. Clara looked north toward the horizon, where storm clouds were beginning to form. They would need shelter soon, but moving Chaitton in his condition might kill him. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, though something deep within her already did. "You could be anyone. You could be deceiving me about everything." Chaitton slowly reached into his pouch and withdrew a small object wrapped in fabric. When he unfolded it, Clara's breath caught. Her father's pocket watch, the one he had carried daily since her grandfather's passing, the one that had been absent from the burned wagon. "He gave me this," Chaitton said softly. "Told me if anything happened to him, I should find his daughter, the one who chose to remain in the desert rather than abandon searching for the truth." Clara stared at the familiar silver case, her vision blurring. The inscription on the back remained visible. "For Thomas Bell. Time heals all wounds." "There's a gathering in 3 days," Chaitton continued, his breathing becoming more labored. "Both sides will attend. If I don't deliver these documents to the proper people, if the truth doesn't emerge," he closed his eyes briefly, "your father's sacrifice will be meaningless, and thousands will suffer for the lives of a few." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Clara looked at the warrior who claimed to possess the key to everything she had lost and everything she might still save. The question was no longer whether she believed him. It was whether she possessed the courage to help him complete what her father had begun. Clara reached her decision as the first raindrops started falling. She couldn't abandon him here to die, regardless of his claims about her father. But moving him would endanger them both. "There's a cave network approximately half a mile east," she said, tucking her father's watch into her shirt pocket. "Are you able to ride?" Chaitton tried to stand and immediately collapsed against the rocks, his face pale. "I can attempt it." "That's insufficient." Clara examined his wounds more thoroughly. The arrow in his shoulder had avoided vital areas, but the one in his thigh was deeper than initially apparent. The gash across his ribs was still seeping blood, despite being several hours old. "You'll bleed to death before we travel 50 yards. She had learned basic medical treatment from her mother, who had served as the settlement's healer before they moved to their isolated homestead. But this exceeded anything she had previously handled. "Leave me the documents," Chaitton said quietly. "Take them to the meeting yourself. Tell them what I've told you. I don't even know where this meeting is supposed to occur or who to trust when I arrive. Canyon of the Painted Rocks. 2 days' ride north of here. Look for a man named Samuel Crawford. He's one of the few honest negotiators your people have. And seek out my uncle, Running Bear. He speaks for our council." Clara shook her head. "I'm not leaving you here to die." Something shifted in Chaitton's expression as he looked at her. Not just gratitude, but surprise, as if he hadn't expected this response from someone whose people he had never met. "Why?" he asked simply. The question caught her off guard. Why was she willing to risk everything for a stranger, for someone whose story she couldn't verify? But as she looked into his dark eyes, she realized the answer had nothing to do with logic. "Because if you're telling the truth about my father, then you're the only connection I have left to my family. And if you're lying," she paused, surprised by her own honesty, "then I'll know soon enough, but I won't have someone's death on my conscience without being certain." The rain was beginning to fall harder now, turning the sand dark around them. Clara looked at her modest shelter in the distance, a small stone structure built into the hillside, barely visible from their current position. "There's another option," she said slowly. "My place. It's closer, and I have medical supplies there. I can make it if you help me." Chaitton's voice was determined despite his obvious pain. "I have to. Too many lives depend on these documents reaching the right hands." Clara extended her hand to help him up, and as their fingers touched, she felt something unexpected. Not just the warmth of human contact she had been without for 3 years, but a strange sense of recognition, as if this moment had been inevitable. "Then we better hurry," she said, "because something tells me we're not the only ones who know about that meeting." As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of horses echoed across the desert, barely audible over the strengthening storm. Clara's blood turned cold as the sound of approaching horses grew louder. 3 riders, maybe 4, moving at a steady pace across the desert floor. in this remote area. That could only mean trouble. We need to move now. She pulled Chaitton's arm over her shoulder, supporting his weight as he struggled to his feet. Can you walk? I have to. His jaw clenched with determination as they began making their way toward her shelter, each step leaving traces of blood in the sand behind them. The rain was falling harder now, which would help wash away their tracks, but also make the journey more treacherous. Clara's modest stone dwelling was built into a natural depression in the hillside, partially hidden by an overhang of rock that her father had reinforced years ago. There, she pointed through the rain, just a little further. As they stumbled forward, Chaitton suddenly grabbed her arm. Wait, listen. The horses had stopped. Clara strained to hear over the rain and wind, and caught fragments of voices carried on the desert air. Tracks lead this way. Can't have gotten far with those wounds. Boss wants him alive. The documents are what matter. Clara's heart pounded. They knew about the documents. This wasn't a random patrol or search party. They were specifically hunting Chaitton. Friends of yours, she whispered. No. Chaitton's expression darkened, which means they're working for whoever hired the raiders, the same people who wanted my tribe blamed for attacking your family. They reached Clara's shelter just as the riders came into view in the distance. Clara quickly pushed open the heavy wooden door, reinforced with iron strips that her father had installed for protection against desert storms and wild animals. Inside, the single room was simple but well organized. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a chimney that vented to the rock above. Shelves held preserved food, medical supplies, and a few precious books. A small bed occupied one corner with thick blankets that would be essential for keeping Chaitton warm while his body fought off infection. Lie down, Clara ordered, helping him onto the bed. I need to treat those wounds properly before you lose any more blood. As she gathered supplies, Chaitton reached for the leather pouch containing the documents. If something happens to me, you have to promise. Nothing's going to happen to you. Clara's voice was firm, but her hand shook slightly as she prepared strips of clean cloth. Those men won't find us here. This place isn't on any map. Outside, the voices were getting closer. Clara could make out individual words now. Split up, check every rock formation. He's bleeding badly. He can't have gone far. Clara finished binding Chaitton's wounds as quickly as possible, tried to ignore how his skin had grown cold to the touch. He was going into shock, his body shutting down from blood loss and trauma. Clara, his voice was barely a whisper. If I don't make it to that meeting, if something happens, stop talking like that. Promise me you'll take the documents. Promise me you'll finish what your father started. Before she could answer, a shadow passed by the small window. One of the riders was directly outside their shelter. Clara held her breath, praying that the storm would mask any sounds from within. Chaitton's breathing was shallow but steady. The documents lay between them, containing secrets that could prevent a war or cost them both their lives. The shadow moved away, but Clara knew they weren't safe yet. Whoever was hunting Chaitton wouldn't give up easily. For what felt like hours, Clara sat motionless beside Chaitton, listening to the riders search the area outside. Their voices grew distant, then close again as they circled back, clearly frustrated by their inability to track their quarry through the storm. Check every cave, every outcrop, she heard one of them shout. He's got to be somewhere. Chaitton's eyes remained closed, but his breathing had steadied somewhat. Clara had managed to stop the worst of the bleeding, though he was still dangerously weak. She studied his face in the dim light filtering through the window, noting the strong jaw, the weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors, the scar that ran from his left temple to his cheek. "Who are you, really?" she whispered, not expecting an answer. To her surprise, his eyes opened slowly. "Someone who made the mistake of trusting the wrong person," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" Chaitton struggled to sit up slightly, his hand moving protectively to the document pouch. "I wasn't supposed to be alone when they found me. I was meeting with an intermediary, someone who claimed to represent settlers interested in peaceful negotiation. But it was a trap." Clara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm. "They were trying to kill you. Worse, they were trying to capture me alive, make it look like I was the one responsible for the attacks on settler families." His voice grew bitter. Dead, I'm a martyr. Alive and confessing under duress. I'm proof that my people are the aggressors. The implications hit Clara like a physical blow. They would have used you to justify a war they've been planning all along. Chaitton's hand found hers, his fingers surprisingly warm despite his condition. Your father discovered who's behind it. Names, bank records, plans to claim the land once both sides are weakened by fighting. Clara looked down at their joined hands, aware of how natural the contact felt despite having known this man for only hours. Tell me about him. About my father. He's been living under an assumed name, working as a ranch hand about 50 miles north of here, gathering evidence, documenting every false flag operation, every bribe witness. Chaitton's grip tightened slightly. He never stopped looking for proof of what really happened to your family, and he never stopped hoping you were alive. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed for 3 years suddenly threatened to spill over. Why didn't he come looking for me? He did, but he thought you were dead too. It wasn't until he saw smoke from your chimney last month that he realized someone was living out here. Chaitton's eyes searched her face. He wanted to come himself, but it was too dangerous. Too many people watching him. Outside, the voices were moving away again, but Clara knew they would be back. Men like that didn't give up easily, especially when the stakes were this high. How long do we have? She asked. The meeting is in 2 days. If we leave tomorrow morning, we can make it. But Chaitton tried to sit up further and wince in pain. I'm not sure I'll be strong enough to ride. Clara made a decision that surprised her with its certainty. Then I'll have to be strong enough for both of us. She moved to her supply shelf and began gathering items for travel, dried food, extra clothing, her father's old rifle and ammunition. If they were going to finish what Thomas Bell had started, they would need every advantage they could get. Clara, Chaitton's voice stopped her. This isn't your fight. You could stay here, wait for all of this to blow over. She turned to face him, her father's pocket watch warm in her palm. It became my fight the moment they took my family from me. And if there's even a chance my father is alive. There is, Chaitton said firmly. I give you my word. Clara nodded, surprised by how much his promise meant to her. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, but she knew the real tempest was just beginning. Dawn broke clear and cold, the storm having passed during the night. Clara had barely slept, keeping watch at the window while Chaitton's breathing gradually grew stronger. By sunrise, his fever had broken, and though he was still weak, he insisted he could travel. We need to leave now, Clara said, helping him sit up. Those riders will be back with reinforcements. Chaitton tested his mobility, grimacing as he put weight on his injured leg. I can ride if you can find me a horse. I have one, a mare I've been keeping in a hidden corral about a mile from here. Clara gathered their supplies into a worn leather pack. She's strong enough to carry us both if necessary. They made their way carefully across the desert floor, Clara supporting Chaitton when the rocky terrain became too difficult for him to navigate alone. The hidden corral was built into a natural depression behind a cluster of large boulders, invisible unless someone knew exactly where to look. The chestnut mare whinnied softly as they approached, clearly happy to see Clara after being alone for several days. As Clara saddled the horse, Chaitton studied the documents one final time, his expression growing increasingly grim. What is it? Clara asked. The scale of this conspiracy is larger than I thought. He pointed to a list of names in her father's careful handwriting. These aren't just local troublemakers. Some of these men have connections to territorial governments, mining companies, railroad interests. Clara felt a chill of understanding. They want to clear out both the settlers and your people so they can claim the mineral rights. Exactly, and they're willing to start a war to do it. Chaitton carefully returned the papers to their protective pouch. The meeting tomorrow isn't just about resolving current tensions. Both sides are bringing their military leaders. If shooting starts there, it could spread across the entire territory. Clara finished saddling the mare. They mounted, Clara taking the reins while Chaitton held onto her waist for support. Despite the circumstances, she found herself acutely aware of his presence behind her, the warmth of his body against her back, the trust implied in his dependence on her guidance. Tell me about your people, she said as they began riding north. I've lived in this territory my entire life, but I've never really understood your customs. Chaitton was quiet for a moment. We believe that the land doesn't belong to any one person, that it's meant to be shared, protected, passed down to future generations intact. His voice carried a note of sadness. Your people see the land as something to be owned, developed, transformed. Neither view is entirely wrong, but they seem impossible to reconcile. Maybe that's exactly what someone is counting on, Clara said. As they rode, Chaitton shared stories of his childhood, his training as a warrior, his role as a mediator between the traditional members of his tribe and those who wanted to adapt more quickly to the changing world. Clara found herself drawn not just to his voice, but to his perspective on life, his quiet dignity in the face of pain and uncertainty. What about you, he asked. What was your life like before, he paused, before your family was murdered? Clara's voice was matter-of-fact, but Chaitton could hear the buried pain. We were happy. My father was building something good out here, a place where people could start over, leave behind whatever had driven them from their old lives. And now, Clara considered the question, now I'm finishing what he started, whether he's alive or not. Ahead of them, the landscape began to change as they entered the foothills that would lead them to the canyon of the Painted Rocks. Somewhere behind them, Clara knew the pursuers were still searching. And somewhere ahead, her father might be waiting, alive and unaware that his daughter was coming to find him. By midday, they had covered nearly half the distance to the canyon, but Chaitton was struggling to stay upright in the saddle. Clara could feel him swaying behind her, his grip on her waist becoming weaker with each mile. We need to rest, she said, guiding the mare toward a cluster of trees near a small stream. We can't stop, Chaitton protested weakly. If we don't reach the canyon by tomorrow morning, you won't reach anywhere if you fall off this horse. Clara dismounted and helped him down, noting how pale he had become. 10 minutes. Let me change those bandages. As she tended to his wounds, Clara realized they were healing faster than she had expected. The herbs her mother had taught her to use were proving effective, and Chaitton's natural strength was helping his body recover. Still, he had lost a lot of blood, and the constant travel was taking its toll. Tell me about this uncle of yours, she said, trying to keep him talking and alert. Running Bear, can we trust it with my life? With your life? Chaitton's voice was firm despite his exhaustion. He's the one who taught me that sometimes peace requires more courage than war. He's been advocating for negotiation with your people for years, even when others in our tribe called him weak. Clara finished rebandaging his shoulder. And Samuel Crawford, the settler representative? I've never met him personally, but your father spoke him with respect, said he was one of the few officials who couldn't be bought. Chaitton caught her hand as she started to pull away. Clara, if something happens at this meeting, if things go wrong, nothing's going to go wrong. But if it does, his dark eyes were intense, searching her face. I want you to know that meeting you, having you choose to help me, it's changed how I see your people, how I see the possibility of our two nations finding common ground. Clara felt her breath catch. There was something in his expression, in the way he was looking at her, that spoke of feelings deeper than gratitude. Chaitton, the sound of approaching horses shattered the moment. Clara's head snapped up, her hand instinctively reaching for her rifle. How many? Chaitton whispered, struggling to stand. Clara listened carefully. 3, maybe 4, coming from the south. The same ones from yesterday? I don't know. Clara helped him back onto the mare, her heart racing. But we're not waiting to find out. They pushed the horse harder than Clara would have liked, following a rocky path that would make their tracks difficult to follow. Behind them, the riders seemed to be gaining ground, their fresher mounts giving them an advantage. There! Chaitton pointed ahead to a narrow passage between 2 cliff faces. If we can reach that canyon entrance, we can lose them in the maze of passages inside. Clara urged the mare forward, but as they neared the canyon mouth, Chaitton suddenly stiffened behind her. Stop, he said urgently. What? Why? Those aren't the same riders who were hunting us yesterday. His voice carried new tension. Those are my people, warriors from my tribe. Clara felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Then we're safe. Maybe. Chaitton's grip on her waist tightened. But if they're here a day early, it means something has gone wrong. The meeting may have been compromised. As the riders emerged from the canyon, Clara could see their painted faces and traditional weapons. They rode with the confidence of men on familiar ground, but their expressions were grim. The lead warrior called out something in a language Clara didn't understand. Chaitton responded, his voice carrying an authority that surprised her. What did he say? Clara asked. Chaitton's answer chilled her to bone. He said the white negotiators never came to meeting point, and there are rumors that Settler Militias are mobilizing for an attack on our village. The war they had been trying to prevent was about to begin. The lead warrior, a man with graying hair and intelligent eyes, dismounted and approached them with obvious concern. Clara recognized a family resemblance immediately. This had to be Running Bear, Chaitton's uncle. Nephew, he said in heavily accented English, clearly for Clara's benefit. We feared you were dead when you didn't return from the meeting. I nearly was. Chaitton slid carefully from the horse, still favoring his injured leg. Uncle, this is Clara Bell. Her father is Thomas Bell, the man who gathered the evidence we need. Running Bear's expression shifted as he looked at Clara with new interest. Your father is a brave man, Miss Bell. He risked everything to uncover the truth. Is he alive? Clara asked, her voice barely steady. He is, but he's in great danger. Running Bear gestured toward the canyon. Come, we have much to discuss and little time. As they entered the canyon of the painted rocks, Clara was struck by the ancient symbols carved into the red stone walls. Running Bear led them to a sheltered area where several other tribal leaders were gathered around a small fire, their faces grave with worry. The situation has worsened, Running Bear explained. 3 settler families were attacked last night, burned out, their livestock stolen. The attacks bear all the hallmarks of tribal raiding parties, but none of our warriors were involved. Chaitton's jaw tightened. More false flag operations. They're forcing both sides toward war and succeeding. An older tribal leader spoke up. Our young warriors are demanding retaliation. They believe the settlers are preparing to drive us from our ancestral lands. Clara pulled out her father's pocket watch, thinking frantically. What if we could prove the attacks were staged? Show both sides who's really responsible. The documents would do that, Chaitton said, touching his leather pouch. But we need to get them to people who have the authority to act. Samuel Crawford for the settlers and your tribal council. Running Bear shook his head. Crawford never arrived at the designated meeting point. We fear he may have been killed or captured to prevent him from hearing the truth. Clara felt a spark of desperate inspiration. Then we bring the truth to them, all of them, at the same time. What do you mean? Chaitton asked. The militias are mobilizing, right? And your warriors are demanding action. Clara stood up, pacing as her idea took shape. What if we could gather both sides in one place under circumstances where they'd have to listen? Running Bear looked skeptical. No tribal leader would willingly walk into a gathering of armed settlers, and no settler commander would trust a meeting with warriors. But they might both come if they thought they were walking into a trap for the other side, Clara said, and if someone they trusted was there to guarantee their safety. Chaitton's eyes widened as he understood her plan. You want to use me as bait? Let both sides think they're capturing the enemy leader who's been orchestrating the attacks. Not bait, Clara corrected. A messenger. Someone who can present the evidence to both sides simultaneously, so neither can claim the other is lying. Running Bear considered this. It could work, but it would require perfect timing and incredible courage from whoever volunteers to be in the middle when both sides realize they've been manipulated. Chaitton stood slowly, his hand resting on the documents that could prevent a war. I'll do it, but I'll need help getting word to both the militia leaders and your war council. And I'll need to find my father, Clara added. If he's alive, he'll know who among the settlers can be trusted to listen to reason. Running Bear nodded grimly. Then we have until sunset tomorrow. After that, our young warriors will ride out for revenge, and nothing will stop this territory from burning. Chaitton turned to Clara, his expression intense. This is dangerous. If it goes wrong, We could both be killed as enemies by either side. Clara met his gaze steadily. Then we'd better make sure it goes right. The next evening, Clara stood at the edge of a natural amphitheater in the canyon, her heart pounding as she watched two separate groups of armed men approach from opposite directions. The Settler Militia, led by a man she now knew was the real Samuel Crawford, came from the east. The Tribal War Council, with Running Bear at their head, approached from the west. Between them, in the center of the open space, Chaitton waited alone. He had discarded his warrior's clothing for simple settler garb, making himself appear as a captured native who had been brought here for questioning. The documents lay in a leather satchel at his feet, along with additional evidence that Clara's father had provided. Thomas Bell stood beside Clara, alive, weathered, but whole. Their reunion had been everything she had dreamed of and more, but now they both watched the most dangerous gamble of their lives unfold below. "This is madness," Crawford called out as his men formed a semicircle around Chaitton. "We came here expecting to negotiate with tribal leaders, not interrogate a prisoner. We came expecting to rescue our kidnapped warrior," Running Bear replied, his warriors spreading out in response to the settlers' movements. "Now we find him apparently working with you,